Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Allison Lagosh. Allison, first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thanks so much, Tom, for having me today. Really
Al-
excited to be here.
Allison, could you tell our audience your professional background?
Sure. So I am the head of compliance for Safer currently, and I've been in the asset management, compliance, regulatory, marketing space for, I guess, going on a little bit over 20 years, and basically focused a lot of my work around compliance, risk management, things of that nature, and supporting large firms to develop programs in these areas and support that work. So
Allison, this is as dynamic a year as I can ever remember in the regulated space. I wanted to start by asking you, what do you see as the key areas for regulatory focus in 2025, especially from the SEC and FINRA?
yes, that's a great question. It's been quite a year so far, and it's almost half over, which is crazy. I have seen in the past, I guess, 6 months, a lot of typical focus. Obviously, we have continued focus on conflicts of interest, Reg BI, Reg SP. And of course, it's a lot more focus, I think, on off channel. The fines in this space for any off channel communications coming from broker dealers continue to like amass a lot of huge fines in this area. So that was kind of like where we pivoted on 2024 and beginning of 2025. And I think that for me, the most, I guess, interesting and kind of more timely topic of this is the focus for us because we're an AI company and safer of the intersection of AI and regulatory concern. So, with that being said, FINRA reminds firms that if they are using AI generated communications and tools for consumers, including any form of agentic kind of chat box and digital means, that they still have to be obviously compliant with securities regulations, which people know. However, it's interesting because that's just coming more and more prevalent in our world from marketing capacity, just the speed to market of using those AI tools to generate content. Anything from like services and portfolio construction, research, or products that rely on this management, you really have to accurately describe how you're incorporating the AI technology because there's definitely an emphasis on AI washing, which is a term they now use. And for those of you who may not know this term, it's basically saying that you have an AI capability or using AI infrastructure in your product or service. So a lot of firms are saying that they have this capability, and when kind of peel back the layers, they actually don't have the capability, or it's a really modified version of that. So I think this term gets thrown around a lot in our industry, and actually startups that are in this space are trying to like market themselves in this way. And the SEC and the DOJ are saying, that you're not accurate, you're misleading investors, et cetera. So it is, I think, going to be more of an area in this space that we're going to see larger fines to really set that tone and to distinguish what the AI capability is from the people that are supporting that in a legitimate sense to those who are going along with the bandwagon and trying to say that they're doing that when they're really not. So again, going back to the misrepresentation and accurate descriptions and ultimately protecting the investor from these.
Allison, in addition to those compliance strategies you just named, I wanted to maybe ask, are there any surprising developments or areas that you think may be overlooked, or maybe it's clients, customers coming to you asking you that question?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because in our current political landscape that everyone is aware of, that the impact of regulations and the compliance space is kind of TBD, right? We're seeing a lot of things that are pivoting off of kind of reactions from the market and kind of the SEC, as I know, undergone a lot of budgetary constraints and layoffs. And then there's also be a CFPB shutdown or temporary shutdown. So it kind of changes every day. So I think it's really challenging to keep up from a regulatory standpoint to project out the future of what's going to happen. But I definitely think that there's like a loosening of some of that regulatory space and that we're going to see still some enforcement, still like rules are not going to just vanish and go away, but we're definitely going to see, I think, a lightened enforcement kind of landscape, maybe potentially for the next couple of months. And what that is yet to be determined. There's still going to be work in this area, but I think it's a really challenging to kind of prepare. I think we already have the rules that as they stand now, but what's to come is hard to prepare for when we're kind of just being reactionary, I guess, in this space because we really don't know what the future is going to hold. But I would say definitely probably more of I would suggest on the side of AIs is going to be a huge focus. I think crypto, we're going to see some more regulation in that space. And I think those two areas are going to be a lot of the emphasis. But other than that, to what shape that takes, it's hard to know.
Allison, one of the areas it seems to me we will see renewed vigor or maybe just vigor is around AML.
Yeah.
And this administration has made clear that they will look very closely at AML. They see that tied to perhaps foreign terrorists, but other nefarious conduct. So, what do these new AML money laundering rules mean for investment advisors? And could you walk us through maybe some of the key components of a strong AML program that you're giving advice on?
Sure. So the scope of AML has been expanded. And for those of you that don't know, so it was primarily in the BD space. Now it has to, in supporting an AML program, right? Around that work is now expanded to investment advisors. And those investment advisors that are registered with the SEC and those that report information to the SEC are basically now incorporated into this. So they have until January of 2026 to comply, and what that means is that they have to really stand up kind of programs in this space. So, just to give you examples of what this would require, the rule requires you to file certain reports, such as SARS, which I know a lot of you are familiar with FinCEN. So, suspicious activity reports when SARS, keep certain records, such as relating to transmittal of funds, comply with record keeping requirements and travel rules. So, it's kind of a whole scope of a compliance program that IAs did not previously have to quote unquote worry about as much. Now they're going to be held subject to to the requirements of AML, similar to what a broker dealer has to do. So it's really kind of leveling the playing field with respect to IAs in this space. So I feel like IAs are knowing this role is coming. I think that they're well aware what they need to do. And if they're not aware of what they need to do, they really need to engage quickly to support this since it is coming within the next 6 months. So, with that being said, it's really getting all of the AML policies and procedures up to date and the controls to monitor those and to prevent illicit financial activities. Independent testing and audit is going to be huge for this space and supervision on the AML side. And then designating probably, if I know larger firms have this in place, but an AML officer. So smaller firms, I think, are going to be challenged with this to get this stood up if they haven't already begun this work to really have training, have a whole compliance program dedicated to that. And that's not easy to just stand up overnight, as it requires a lot of resourcing and a lot of work and to really get this in a place where you can feel confident about that. So I would suggest if IAs out there haven't done so to prepare themselves, they should really engage their legal and compliance teams to support this whole program development area. And then if they do have maybe something that can leverage some people or have a BD arm that they can help support that work or at least have something for them to customize and leverage. So that's another area that could be a possible, I wouldn't say shortcut, but at least would help to get that done in a quicker state. And then just monitor the program and have a really dedicated AML officer to support and maybe a staff underneath them, depending on the scope of the firm that you're supporting. So those are my
Allison,
questions.
you've mentioned AI a couple of times, but I wanted to circle back and maybe ask you directly, what regulatory indicators should firms be watching regarding AI? You've talked about AI washing and a couple of other points, but really, when you're sitting down with a CCO, CEO, or maybe even a board, really, maybe we could even go with those 3 levels because they each have a different level of responsibility. When you're sitting across from a chief compliance officer, how do you advise them on what regulatory indicators they should be watching?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So there's a lot to be watching in this space because we don't have a formalized AI regulation in the US. We have the EU Act that's recently stood up. So if you're doing business in the EU, you have to comply with that, which is very lengthy and basically focused on a lot of safety and non-bias work and testing. So I would say from a US perspective, we're starting to see more regulation in the space. Primarily, I think Colorado is the first state to pass an AI law. That also been emphasis is on safety, as you can imagine, and to not have bias in this area. So essentially that's what we're seeing, but kind of translating it to our industry, I would say the reliance on AI vendors, I would just do a lot of due diligence to kind of look behind these vendors to get kind of an idea of how you're testing this, how you're validating that this is supporting your business. I would talk to other C-level folks in your industry or colleagues that are using certain, I would say, certain vendor reliance. And then also there's governance boards that are really going behind peeling the letters, even peeling the layers behind some of these models, right? So a lot of firms are doing their own in-house AI work. So even with that internal process, there needs to be a testing and kind of validation and ensuring that this is credible and accurate and really supporting that business need. So there's a lot of work that goes into just not saying you're using these AI tools to support this process. I think those have to be embedded into like your compliance program and your controls to kind of vet. If you have a governance board, you have to get approval. So there's definitely going to be a lot of work to use these tools either in-house or external for vendor management perspective, but I think it all has to tick and tie together. So my advice is the regulatory space is still evolving, that we don't have very specific rules, but it's mirroring other rules we have to make sure everything is accurate and vetted essentially and coming into a control kind of testing, I think, capacity when you're relying on it to, let's say, to do monitoring or to execute or help support a process. So you can't just say, okay, we're using this tool, this is the output, and we're relying on it. There definitely needs to be a lot more checks and balances to it. So that's my advice, to keep an eye on it. I think we're going to see more, maybe state level at some point, maybe it's going to be federal level of regulation in different areas. Like, for example, I think we're going to see different industries using more and more of AI, but also it's going to get very my prediction is going to get very detailed and very linear in the next, I would say, decade to what exactly you need to do. And then maybe in the next 1 to 5 years, we're going to have a little more insight into specific regulations that support these industries. But for now, I would just leverage your firm's compliance and legal support teams. And if you have an AI governance board, they're versed into all of these issues. So I think I would rely on them heavily to do that.
Allison, I often tell compliance professionals that the future is now. And what I mean by that is what the government expects in terms of regulatory oversight and actually what the business expects of making sure compliance relates to business value is you have to show that now. But I wanted to maybe use that to introduce the topic of future proofing and how could you help a company future proof for upcoming regulatory changes?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think that it's all a theme of like future proofing, even though right now it seems like there's kind of maybe a perception of lessened, maybe regulatory focus. But I think you always have to kind of plan for the future, plan for different political environments, economic environments. So you almost, I would say, apply as strict of a standard that works for your firm as you can, because you could kind of always adjust that, but you can't kind of go back in time. So I would be conservative in the areas that you are working through, but there's going to be enforcements that come and go. It doesn't mean that it's not going to come back. So I think to future proof it is do the standard that you're comfortable with, and that is compliance in this point of time. You can't really predict what's going to happen in the future, and you can adjust as needed. But I think that the leadership and compliance teams, it's really hard and challenging to keep up in this ever changing environment. And I would just recommend kind of staying informed, reading through any like supporting regulations that you have, just to gain awareness and keep on top of the AI regulations that might be coming through as well. I know the FINRA and SEC have sometimes published an FAQ document on their website to just be alerted to those. And a lot of firms do kind of compliance little, I guess, insights and proactive communication. So I would say keep those up because it's really important to just not lose sight of the importance of these things that can always come in terms of an audit or a fine or anything that is under your purview in a compliance aspect. You're going to be ultimately held responsible for. So I wouldn't like lessen the scrutiny of it. I would just try to stay as informed as possible and rely on the teams that support that work from a leadership perspective and really kind of have a tone from the top to say we are supporting these people and these jobs to get us to a place where we can have risk management, compliance, legal, all the teams kind of synced and marching to the same themes because I think it does get confusing and sometimes we want to really gain partnership with all of those teams onto what needs to be done and the focus. So I guess that's my advice. We can't predict the future, but we can a point in time reference right now.
I think it would be a well-worn phrase to say the only constant is change. But I'm
Right.
gonna maybe add to that by saying, at least in 2025, another constant is uncertainty. So I
Right.
wanted to close our podcast on that. I was just at a compliance conference. It was non-regulated industries, but still compliance conference, and uncertainty was, I think, the vibe, if I can use that
The
word.
very
When you
yeah, it's well used. I feel like that's always how they close out. We don't know what's gonna happen, but this is
So
yeah.
how what kind of advice can you leave for our listeners around that uncertainty? Is it to have the basic framework in place? Is it to have a trusted advisor such as yourself that you can bounce ideas off no matter what the situation may be above us politically? How can we deal with this uncertainty? Or how would you counsel someone in the CCO role in a regulated industry that's a customer of Safer?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the uncertainty is what we are hearing from a lot of our clients out there, a lot of industry, and I feel like everybody is, for good or bad, in the same boat. And I think that the reliance and of vendors that support AI is incredible. And I feel like it's just there's so much attention to vendors and reg tech space right now. I would say there's probably a vendor for every solution, if not more. And I think wading through that is challenging. And I think there's just a lot of resources out there. But I would say there's support out there. I think education is a huge component. I feel like C level or CCOs obviously have to educate themselves into the AI integration space, whether they want to or not. We're going to be using that for, for the next, I'm not sure how many years, but that's not going away. So I would say get well versed, educated in this area if you're not already. I think that we're going to see a lot of more harmonization between IAs and BDs as we're seeing in the AML space. And we're seeing some restructuring, right? We're seeing certain agencies that are kind of shifting. And so that's a little bit like we don't know exactly where that might be going. But then again, 3 or 4 years from now, we could see something entirely different. So it's rely on your compliance teams and educate yourself. I would say consultants, I feel like have a great value to this space that we should be leveraging as well. If we feel like, you know what, we need a second opinion, we're not sure of XYZ, I would say to engage those folks too, if you don't have any in-house support for that. So I think there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of research. And of course, like trust the research from your regulatory agencies and anything that they put on their website is a great source of information to help with this area. But again, there's not a lot coming out there right now that's guiding this space. So it is uncertain because it feels uncertain because it is uncertain. So I would say that we're kind of all in the same space together. We should be helping each other to the extent that we can and really vetting these vendors because as I said, a lot of vendors out there, a lot of them have great intentions, but unfortunately there's some that don't. And kind of being really mindful and careful, essentially, of who you're doing business with to support these compliance functions. So, with all that being said, I think Safer can help support in this area. We have a lot of great things going on, and we're happy to provide more information of how we can help support this kind of unguided time, really. It's a very interesting, ever-changing time we're in. So that's my advice, to reach out and get help when you can, if you can't support it in-house with your respective teams.
Allison, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if any of our listeners wanted to connect with you or find out more about any of the topics or Safer,
Sure.
what would be the best way for them to do so or the best place for them to go?
Sure. So I can be connected on LinkedIn. Reach out. Feel free to connect with me. And also Saifr.ai. .ai.com is our website. And I'd encourage you to go there as well. We have a lot of, on this regulatory space, I do a lot of blogs. We have a team of SMEs that do blogs on all of these different areas that are really interesting. So I think it's a great resource to check out. And if you want to learn more information, happy to help. Or if you have any other questions, feel free to reach me on LinkedIn. My name on LinkedIn, so it's pretty straightforward.
Allison, thank you again. I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Compliance Podcast Network. Start your mornings with daily compliance news, quick, sharp updates on the top compliance and ethics stories in under 5 minutes every morning in Compliance Podcast Network. Because compliance never sleeps. Need practical advice fast? Check out Compliance Tip of the Day. One actionable idea to level up your program. Short and sweet, every day on Compliance Podcast Network. Got 10 minutes? We've got the week's top 10 stories. 10 for 10 brings you the big compliance headlines. Fast, fun, and focused. Every Saturday on Compliance Podcast Network. And don't miss the Sunday Book Review, where compliance meets culture through must-read books and big ideas every Sunday in Compliance Podcast Network. Whether you're in the office, on a walk, or commuting, stay smart, stay ethical, stay tuned. Only on the Compliance Podcast Network. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.